In a land where the sun kissed the earth and every creature moved in rhythm with the world, there was a hyena driven by a hunger deeper than any could understand. While others were satisfied with what they had, he always craved more, eyeing every meal as if it alone could fill the emptiness inside him. His desire knew no limits, and soon, he would find himself on a path that few dared to walk. This is the tale of a lesson hidden in the shadows of greed, a story of one who tried to take it all, and what he found waiting for him. In a distant land, there was a place where animals roamed free beneath the watchful eye of the sun. It was a land where the trees stood tall and the rivers sang through the valleys. In this vast, untamed world, creatures lived their lives in balance, each taking only what they needed. But among them was a hyena, whose hunger never seemed to end, no matter how much he took. His desire would lead him on a journey that no one could have imagined. There was something different about this hyena. While the other creatures of the land took only what they needed, living in harmony with the earth, this one was never satisfied. Day after day, he prowled the land, watching others feast, always yearning for more. No matter how much food he found, it never seemed to fill the emptiness inside him. His greed was endless, and with each meal, he grew bolder, taking more than his share, leaving little for the others. The other animals couldn't understand it. The gazelles fed in peace. The lions rested after their hunts, yet this hyena never stopped. He would take a little from here, a little from there, always watching, always waiting for the next opportunity. His eyes, filled with envy, followed those who were content, those who were satisfied with enough. And though they warned him to be careful, to not take more than he needed, the hyena wouldn't listen. He was driven by a hunger, not just for food, but for something he couldn't quite name. Little did he know, his actions would soon lead him to a place where nothing would be enough, and the cost of his greed would be greater than he could ever imagine. And soon, he grew clever in his pursuit. No longer was it enough to simply wait for scraps. He would use every trick in the book to get what he wanted. One morning, as the soft light of dawn stretched across the plains, the hyena saw a generous gazelle grazing by the edge of the watering hole. The gazelle, known for her kindness, noticed the hyena and offered a friendly greeting. "Why don't you join me?" she said with a smile. "There is plenty to share." The hyena, his stomach growling with greed, saw an opportunity. He feigned hunger, told her he hadn't eaten in days, and without hesitation, the gazelle invited him to feast beside her. But the hyena had no intention of sharing. He devoured her food, nibbling at his own portion while pushing her away with false gratitude. His stomach was never full, yet he pretended to be content. When the gazelle grew tired and wandered off, the hyena wasted no time in finishing everything in sight. He smiled to himself, satisfied, for a moment, but the hunger never stopped. The very next day, as the hyena trotted through the thick brush, he spotted a young hare hopping nervously by a patch of berries. The hare, with big, fearful eyes, looked up at the hyena and immediately shrank back. The hyena, pretending to be friendly, softly approached. "Little one, there's no need to fear. Come, share your food with me. I am your friend." The young hare hesitated, his tiny heart pounding, but the hyena's smooth words and warm tone slowly calmed him. "But I've worked so hard for these berries," the hare murmured. "I don't have much to spare." The hyena, knowing how to play on the hare's fears, whispered, "You must be very wise to gather such a bounty. But remember, sharing with a friend brings good fortune. Surely you can spare just a few." Reluctantly, the hare agreed, and as soon as he did, the hyena pounced, taking the berries without warning. The more the hyena took, the more he wanted, his hunger growing insatiable. But still he wasn't full. His greed had only grown sharper. his appetite ever more demanding. The hyena's gluttony spread across the land, his schemes never resting, as the once peaceful animals began to notice something was amiss. The lions, the gazelles, even the elephants, they all began to see the same pattern. The hyena was taking more than his share, using lies, trickery, and manipulation to feed his endless desires. Tension began to rise, and whispers spread throughout the land. The hyena was no longer a mere nuisance. He was a threat to the balance of their world. And still he took more. Ever more. But the question remained, would there ever be enough? As the days stretched on, the hyena's greed became a weight that no longer stayed hidden. His schemes, once successful, began to backfire. The other animals, once so trusting, began to sense his deceit. Slowly, they started avoiding him, whispers of his gluttony echoing through the plains. The gazelles, once generous, kept their distance. The lions, proud and regal, no longer offered him a morsel of their hunt. Even the once sociable monkeys swung from branch to branch, wary of the hyena's sharp eyes and sharper hunger. But the hyena, lost in his own desires, never noticed. He kept pushing forward, chasing after whatever food he could find. One morning, as the sun climbed high and the heat began to rise, the hyena spotted a wild boar, large and unsuspecting, foraging in a dense thicket. His stomach growled in anticipation. This would be his feast, he thought. No one else would dare to come near. His plan was simple: outwit the boar, steal a meal, and leave before anyone could stop him. His cunning mind worked quickly as he stalked through the thick brush, but his greed led him too far. He ignored the warning signs, the dry earth beneath him, the shifting ground, and pressed on, determined to have it all. Then, just as he lunged forward, the ground beneath him gave way. With a loud crash, the hyena tumbled into a deep, narrow pit. His body slammed against the cold walls, and the sharp rocks cut into his sides. For a moment, he lay stunned, his breath coming in shallow gasps. As he struggled to rise, his eyes widened in disbelief. The pit was too deep, the sides were too steep, there was no way out. He had gone too far, chased too much, and now his greed had trapped him, alone and vulnerable. Up above, the animals heard his desperate cries. The hyena, once feared and cunning, was now helpless. And it was then that he realized, the very hunger that had driven him to take more than his share had now isolated him. No one would come to his aid. No one would help the creature who had taken so much from everyone else. As the hours passed, the hyena's cries grew quieter, the weight of his isolation settling in. Days passed as the hyena sat in the dark pit, his body growing weaker with each passing hour. The once strong, cunning creature was now a shadow of himself, his energy drained by hunger and his pride shattered. The ground beneath him was cold, and the walls of the pit seemed to grow higher the more he struggled. The hyena could hear only the distant sounds of the wind, a cruel reminder that the world above continued without him. As the sun set each day, he thought about the animals he had once outwitted: the gazelle, the young hare, the boar. He remembered their kindness, their trust, and the way he had taken from them without a second thought. The more he reflected, the clearer it became. His hunger had never been about food. It had been about something deeper, an emptiness that he had never truly understood. And now, that very hunger had led him to this lonely place, cut off from the very world he had once been part of. And as the silence stretched on, the hyena finally understood. Greed could never fill the heart. It only empties it further. Just as the hyena's strength had nearly failed him, and the hopelessness of his situation began to settle like a heavy weight on his heart, a shadow passed over the edge of the pit. The hyena, exhausted and broken, lifted his weary eyes, expecting nothing but more emptiness. But there, standing above him, was a figure he did not expect. It was the tortoise, wise, slow, and cautious. The creatures of the land had always looked at the tortoise with a mix of respect and wariness. He was a quiet observer, always thoughtful, never rushing to act. The tortoise peered down at the hyena, who was too weak to speak. His once proud form reduced to a pitiful sight. "You've taken much," the tortoise said softly, his voice low but steady. "But now you've nothing. Tell me, hyena, will you change your ways? Will you take only what you need from now on?" The hyena's heart sank. He had never felt so small, so humbled. His once insatiable hunger now seemed like a distant memory, something he could no longer even comprehend. He nodded slowly, his voice weak but sincere. "I will change. I will take only what I need. Understand now. My greed has cost me everything." The tortoise did not respond right away. He simply studied the hyena, as if weighing the truth in his eyes. After a long moment, the tortoise finally reached down a leg, offering it to the hyena, a silent promise of help. With a slow but steady pull, the tortoise helped the hyena out of the pit, guiding him back to solid ground. The hyena stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of his redemption settle in, the cool air of freedom filling his lungs. For the first time in a long while, the hyena felt something he had never known: gratitude. His insatiable hunger had been quelled, replaced by the understanding that there was much more to life than taking, much more to be gained from giving and living in harmony. And as the tortoise turned to leave, the hyena watched him with newfound respect. He had learned the lesson he had refused to see for so long. True abundance comes not from taking, but from knowing when enough is enough. This tale teaches us a powerful lesson: that greed, when left unchecked, can lead us down a path of emptiness and isolation. The hyena's endless hunger for more caused him to lose everything he once held dear, until he was left with nothing but regret. Sometimes, the desire to take more than we need can leave us with far less than we started with. The true richness in life lies not in how much we take, but in knowing when enough is enough. If you enjoyed the tale of the greedy hyena, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more captivating African folktales. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the hyena truly learned his lesson, or do you think his hunger will return? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned for the next story that awaits.